Have you let it get you yet? People never saying how bad you're gonna get. And I've been calling to the sky, please don't let more bullets fly. Have you heard the talk of the cities and the towns? There's a fear from the inside and the toil all around. And I've been hoping for my help, find the cure to calm myself.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Critical Mass TV, the show that refuses to march to the drum of defeatism and conventional confusion. A little mixed mental arts makes you know you're alive. Critical mass, the most user-friendly definition of critical mass, is the least number of people it takes to change the world. So let's get it on. We have 3 segments on Critical Mass TV. Eye on the Greed Cult with yours truly. Art Break with Kathy Hartley features a local creative genius telling us what's up in their world. And lastly, Voices Vermont is a conversation with an active Vermonter making a difference for the right reasons. Remember, if we don't get involved, if we don't do politics, politics will continue to do us. We will be trapped continually bickering over the means of our own demise. The two-party state is a sham. It allows a revolving door, a circuitous dance of Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. Tweedle 1 will always be shouting, "Quick! Their boat is sinking. Jump on ours. Ours is the only way to survive. Quick, jump on." Then Tweedle number 2 waits a short time before raising the cry, "Quick, their boat is sinking." And so on and so on and so on. We have our work cut out for us. We face daily calls for us to get along, to cooperate with our adversaries, to lower our expectations and trust centrist Democrats to lead us with kinder, gentler versions of greed cult corporatism that is destroying nature, society, and life, liberty, and justice in America and around the world. It seems to me to be another face put on treason and betrayal. Always know that the corporatist parties, their primary spin technique is called putting the little guy face on the big business agenda. Every issue is discussed around the propaganda use of the terms freedom, choice, and opportunity. But the end user is always those that are too big to jail. I mean, too big to fail, of course. It is up to us, from dismantling the egregious child labor system of the 19th century to women's suffrage, our basic labor rights, Social Security, and the recognition of African Americans as human beings through the Civil Rights and Voting Acts of the 1960s. None of these achievements for working people came spontaneously from our governments. Every one of these resulted from people taking action in the streets. Remember, it doesn't always work, but without independent organizing and focused action, nothing happens for your interests. Nothing, and it never will. It's a corporate and billionaires' candy store, and the only thing that trickles down is your sweat and your blood. Some people respond to me that it's all just a pipe dream, just too utopian and unrealistic. But know now, big dreams and visions of a better place are what drive and inspire us and give people the unstoppable power to make it so. I mean, shit. We've got the moral high ground, we've got the numbers, And we have the power if we learn how to use it. 60% of Americans don't vote. And I get that. It resembles voting on WWE wrestling. If I have to think of an analogy, it really reminds me of professional wrestling. I mean, wrestling is an obvious farce where the winner is predetermined and only the weak-minded or susceptible are tricked. The winners know who they are, however. They are not tricked. Someone says, I have no opinion, really, or I don't have any politics. Well, this is never true, and it can't be true. Those opinions are your politics. It's called a null set. You are abdicating, basically, your rights in favor of the greed cult. Politics is the never-ending struggle for power. It is always fluid and always changeable. And without a strong politics, you will never achieve justice and liberty for you and your group. We are in, for a lack of a better definition, the 5th decade of a power-packed push to reestablish ruling class power in the United States. The robber barons of the late 19th century never really went away. They just diversified and climbed nightly into more and more coffins for some undead rest. The 1960s, a fluorescence of the power of people. Only the 1930s and the labor movement shook the halls of power with equal ferocity. The inspirations of this activism have different labels, but both decades reflect a pendulum swing back away from being docile and compliant about getting screwed. The labor movement achieved some basic gains, but between the Taft-Hartley Act, which allowed companies to hire scab workers, etc., and was passed 2 years after the original act legalizing unionizing in America, and McCarthyism and its anti-union, anti-left, anti-American propaganda, it has been under attack by the greed cult ever since, and that is the labor movement that I'm referring to. And more on this, we'll talk about this at great length in another show. We all know about some aspects of the 1960s. What most of us don't realize is the extent to which the events rocked the ownership class and its minions. Think about it. From the beats and beatniks telling authority to pound sand, to massive demands by formerly underclass citizens to be recognized as humans, to be able to sign contracts and to vote. Students all over the country turning on and tuning in and just saying no to industrial warfare, class warfare, and blind obedience to authority. Believe me when I say that these owner-managers were scared shitless. So in trots Lewis Powell Jr., a tobacco executive that crafted an infamous memo that he sent to every CEO and wealthy interest in the United States, warning of the dire threat to the corporate capitalist state and the dominance of industry, finance, and billionaires generally. This memo was sent in 1970. It warned that the natives were restless and gaining some ground, and he called for cash donations from every targeted source to funnel through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and with the end result of creating more think tanks to implement these policies about reestablishing the ruling class power and influence future change using the unlimited cash available and easily manipulated conservative working people as their foot soldiers. Right-wing think tanks exploded from a few hundred to thousands by the early 1980s. Reagan was a culmination of a post-Nixonian push to reestablish ruling class power. And Lewis Powell Jr. was appointed as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, where he continued to aggressively push to codify corporate dominance and corporate personhood and build the untouchable firewall that surrounds these figurative castles to this day. Remember the concept of neoliberalism that we spoke of last time. Well, this is another pattern in the greed cult fabric that lays over us all. I remember George Bush. Don't hear much of him these days. I kind of miss him and Uncle Dickie. At least you knew where they stood. Like them or hate them, they were pretty much in your face with the militaristic, secretive, exceptionalist fascism that defined their party during their rule. The contemporary change we can believe in is much more insidious. Obama has expanded the hellfire assassination by drone of thousands of people in countries around the world, most of which are men, women, and children that are called guilty by proximity by the Pentagon and the CIA, meaning only that they were too near the explosive charge and shrapnel to survive. The ratio is something like 50 or 75 terrorist targets and about 3,000 innocent people killed to date. Just in the last 2 weeks, there have been 5, 10, or 15 drone attacks in Yemen alone, popping people with hellfires aplenty. Does this make us safer or our embassies safer? Does it create dozens of more generations of terrorists willing to die to strike back at a system that would do this to their fathers and uncles and activists? The founding fathers were terrorists in the eyes of old King George. All resisting Native Americans were terrorists. All resisting Native Americans were terrorists in the eyes of 18th and 19th century greed cult planners. One woman's terrorist is another woman's freedom fighter. Native Americans were guilty by proximity. They happened to live on land that our ancestors wanted desperately and were willing to do anything to get. Indigenous Middle Eastern peoples are also guilty by proximity. They are proximate to trillions of barrels of light, sweet crude. One can easily see that any resistance to Western power or the despots supported by Western power will have them dehumanized and branded as terrorists at will. Weren't we going to change for the better and close frickin' Guantanamo? Weren't we going to rein in the worst constitutional abuses of Bush Cheney and reduce domestic spying by the National Security Agency? Maybe even cut back spying on our own allies. Wouldn't that be crazy? Using the CIA for summary executions and corporate espionage? My bad. I guess I didn't realize what change really meant. By drastically increasing all of this, I guess it is a form of change. All right, so what the hell can we do? Firstly, knowledge is power. We need to pay attention and develop our intellectual self-defense. This is the ability to see through the spin and determine who benefits and who pays. To see the difference between narrow self-interested thought control spun by corporate media and positive, constructive information that will empower people to participate in the crucial decision-making loops that determine our future. The most powerful equation throughout history is what is produced and how will it be distributed. But there are many more decisions that we need to be included in if we are to have any chance at lives full of promise, hope, dignity, and justice for all. We need to begin meeting together regularly in new, small d democratic ways. The schools are empty every single night and summer. And hey, we're already paying for them. And what a great meeting place. So the venues are everywhere. Once people realize the danger of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, we can all see that what develops or intensifies is a quality of life gap. We can meet and discuss what quality of life means and how the developing gap can best be closed. How to change the goals of multinational corporations from short-term greed to maximizing quality of life for their owners, workers, and the customers alike. I mean, isn't there long-term money, isn't there more long-term money in enriching your customers' lives in a meaningful way rather than exploiting and killing them? There's not much excitement on a dead planet. We can discuss people-oriented investment, increasing people-oriented innovation, increasing the quality of goods and services that matter, resulting in a rising quality of life, reducing income inequality, power inequality, class warfare by the rich, and economic instability. We really need, under our own motivation, to work towards a new constitutional convention. Arguing endlessly about the means of our own demise is getting us nowhere and buys into the insanity. We need to be honest at core levels that we are not used to. We need to be honest. We will learn to blend traditional and contemporary values and lifestyles. We need to emphasize that we are great not just because we are we. This road leads to authoritarianism. But based on our common humanity, we are great. All of us everywhere are the same, miraculously adaptable species that have persevered for hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of years. We have faced tougher than this more than once, and we have kicked ass. Unfortunately, to quote Pogo, we have met the enemy and they are us. Please, know your power. Now, me being always the heavy, here is going to be the light. It's time for a short break, and then art break with Kathy Hartley. Peace.
Have you read the news? Have you let it get you? Yeah, people there are saying how bad you're gonna get. And I've been calling to the sky, please don't let more bullets fly. Have you heard the talk of the cities and the towns? There's a fear from the inside and the toil all around. And I've been hoping for my help, find the cure to come and save.
and welcome to Art Break. This is a show about interviewing local artists, musicians, writers, chefs, and any other creative people out there. I would love to have you on my show. Today, my guest is Nakki Goranin.
Hi.
She's a professional photographer and writer and teacher of both photography and writing. She's a former Vermont artist in residence for the Vermont Council for the Arts. She was awarded a grant for the National Endowment for the Arts through the VCA of photography of Vermont artists. It all ties in together. And she was in 3 major museum photography shows in Europe last year. Nakki, your current book that you have out is This American Photo Booth. And tell me a little bit about this. I understand it took you years to research this.
Well, this book was published by W.W. Norton,
Right.
and it's the first book that came out that tells the whole history of photo booths. Not just what the images are, but the personalities, the lifestyles, everything that went together to create the photo booth machine, the industrial aspects of what a photo booth is. I literally drove around America meeting with people all over the country who had worked in photo booth factories and got the entire story of how this amazing booth came to be. I also have a very large number of photos, of photo booth images from 1926 through contemporary times. And
Wow.
I have never met anybody that didn't love being in a photo booth.
I have memories of that. A lot of people do. It was neat to just watch them pop out, and you can smell the fresh
Yeah, the chemicals.
chemicals.
It's a chemical booth. It's not digital. I mean, there are digital photo booths now,
now.
but the chemical booths are still the best.
Yep, amazing. And are there any around still?
Yes, there are. There are approximately about 220 chemical photo booths in America, and they're becoming popular again.
Oh,
and there's a guy in Chicago, Anthony Vazzari, who is remaking the old chemical photo booths.
Amazing. Wow,
And there are
cool.
people, they're ordering them from all over the world. He sends about 5 or 6 booths to Europe every year, and he just sent one to Alaska. I mean, they're really, really
A
popular.
resurgence of interest. I love that. That's nice. What's old is new again.
There are a lot of people that don't love digital, and I'm one of them.
That's great. All right, so this was Nakki's current book, but you're working on 2 more books.
Yes. Yeah, I have been working for a long time on my 2 epics. One of them is on the history of tintypes, but this book's going to be different from any other photo history book that's out there. This book is going to deal with the personalities and the lifestyles of people who created tintype cameras. It's going to be talking about the old tintypists, especially in Vermont, who went from farm to farm, fair to fair in their wagons and actually developed tintypes. Even when it was 40 below, they were able to create an environment where they could still have the chemicals work. And I'm also going to have a whole section on contemporary tintypes. Tintypes have resurged. There are many people that are reacting to digital photography nowadays.
Right.
So as digital becomes more and more common, more people are turning back to the older styles of chemical photography.
Right.
And as I said,
It's like a
I'm
lost
very
art.
excited. Yeah, and I'm very excited by the older processes.
Right.
And I have made
And it's
tin
literally
types.
on tin.
Press iron.
Press iron.
It's a
Okay.
positive image on press iron, and you can have images that were called gems that are the size of a postage stamp, or you can actually have what are called mammoth plates, which were 16 by 20.
Can you just briefly say how a photographer uses a tintype?
What a photographer would do is they were called wet plates, and the chemistry would be put in the dark on the press iron plate in the camera. The photographer would then expose the image, take it into a little black tent that he had to start the developing process, and within about 2 minutes, people would be handed a wet tintype to take home. And they weren't very expensive.
Right.
And it was something that made
Something-
photography available
To
the common
everybody,
man.
right,
Yeah, which is one of the
exactly.
wonderful things about photography is it's the first art form that no matter who you were, no matter where you lived, you could get a photograph.
Right, right. Art for the people.
Yes.
Love that. I love that. So that is a book that's in the process.
I've been working on, again, many years doing the research. Most of the information that's going to be in this book has never been published anywhere, and so I'm really excited about that. There are some wonderful books on tintypes that are available. They're out now, but this book is going to be almost totally unique because I have worked so hard to uncover very special information.
Right, you can educate us with things that we've never
And entertain.
And entertain.
Entertain.
With things we've never seen or most of us don't know anything about.
And hopefully there will be more than 12 people that are interested in this besides
I'm
myself.
sure there will be. I'm sure there
Yeah.
will be. And then you have another amazing book that you've been working on.
Yeah, I have a tremendous interest for some bizarre reason in early aviation, and especially in early Vermont aviation. And for about 20 years, I've been researching Vermont's first aviator, whose name was George Smith. He was from Rutland. He unfortunately only lived to be 21. He was killed in an air crash in Rutland when he was 21. But he was the first person to fly in much of Central America, the first person to fly in most parts of South America. He broke over 100 aviation records. He flew with Glenn Curtiss. He was just this extraordinary kid. And there was a freak accident at the Rutland Fairgrounds, and it'll be 100 years this September 2013 that he was killed. And I have been collecting the few photographs that are out there of him flying all over the United States, Central America, and South America. And I'm trying to tell his story. I'm trying to tell what it was like to be a young person at this time in history.
And what year, what were the years that he was alive?
Well, he was born in 1892, and he built his first glider in Rutland around 1906, 1907. He also had the first radio station in Vermont. He did all these
What
first.
an amazing
Yeah,
character.
he
What a-
was,
what
and he
a-
was very handsome too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
well, that's just, and right from Rutland, and just had so much passion for
yeah.
flight.
Well, he went at 16. He left Rutland and he went to Mineola, Long Island, New York, and that's where all the aviators were getting together, experimenting with new planes. It was in Los Angeles and Mineola, and he was instructed in aviation from Glenn Curtiss, from someone named Captain Baldwin, the top people at the time. And even when he was at Mineola, when he was 16, he was breaking aviation records.
Wow.
He was the first person to fly at 18 or 19 from the Atlantic to the Pacific. He, at that time period, flew higher than anyone else, and
That's
he flew
incredible.
farther than anyone else. The first person to fly over water.
So he's just a fascinating person.
Yes.
And that's so cool. And I actually read a long article, several pages, in a Vermont magazine.
Which I wrote.
Which you wrote, and
Yeah.
I was just reading this incredible story about this man. Right, and then you ended up, that was your piece.
Yeah, Vermont has a very interesting history of aviation. And for reasons I don't understand, no one's really written very much about it. There have been some extraordinary women aviators. And
Is that going to be your next book?
I'm thinking about it. Amelia Earhart had friends in the Northeast Kingdom. So actually, and many people don't know this, but Amelia Earhart spent quite a bit of time in Vermont.
Really?
On vacations, and she was known within a certain community. And Lindbergh, of course, was very good friends with Governor Harkness. So 1 month after Lindbergh flew to Paris, 1 month later, he was here in Springfield, Vermont.
Really?
Yeah, which again, many people don't realize.
Right, the more research you do, the more you uncover and
Oh, yeah.
unearth all this amazing information.
And we're a tiny little state,
Yeah.
but we've produced some extraordinary people here in the
Extraordinary
state.
people, absolutely.
Yeah, and again, part of my interest comes from aviation because the photography that is used to document a lot of this flying really speaks to my heart.
Oh, that's just, I love these books. Okay, so this is well, it's Nakki's favorite picture from the
Well, yeah.
American Photo Booth book. Here's see if I can get this nice and clear. It's a great
Yeah, this is
picture.
a photo that was taken probably in the early 1930s, very similar to a lot of the images that Dorothea Lange did in the different, from the WPA photo project. And they're two farm boys somewhere in the Midwest. And there's just something so touching for me personally in this little photo booth image. To me, the image is as strong as anything you would see from any of the top professional photographers
Right.
who were working at the time. The photo booth is extraordinary because it can really capture a naturalness and a drama and a sense of emotion that you don't see in formal photographic situations.
Right.
Because people are too self-conscious.
Right. This speaks of how you're feeling at the moment,
Yeah.
and without putting on any airs or pretending that you're feeling something else. This is actually, you're in the photo booth, your emotions are coming out, giggly or serious or however you're feeling. Okay, so we'll have to do a future show about George Schmidt.
I'd love to.
That would be wonderful. I'm sure there's lots to talk about with that.
There certainly is.
And what other publications have featured your book?
Well, I had my artwork and some work from my collections have been featured in several European books and in 52 magazines around the world. My book was featured in People magazine, and for me, most exciting was I was included in an article in the New Yorker by the late John Updike before he died. I was in the same paragraph as Susan
Really?
Sontag, so I mean that was really exciting.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, I'm in
Pretty
a
impressive.
French book that came out last year from I never can say his name, Raynal Pellier, called Photomaton. If you speak French, you can see my artwork there. There's another book that I'm featured in, another French book, which came out about 7 months ago, Behind the Mirror, and there's work from my collection there. I am always trying to not, I have so many ideas, so many thoughts, so many feelings about photography.
And that's an
I'm
amazing
trying
subject.
to like edit it down and just focus on one book at a time, because photography encompasses all the human
Right,
experience.
everything.
So it's
Everything,
hard. Yeah,
right.
it's hard to just focus on one different
Right.
aspect at a time.
It's so cool. I love photography. So right now you have a permanent exhibit.
Yes.
And that's in the lobby of the State Building on Cherry Street in Burlington.
Yes, the whole lobby. It's called A Vermont Photo Album, A Paper House of Love, and it's a combination of historic images from my collections of Vermonters mixed in with photos that I have taken of different people in Vermont.
Wow, I love looking
None
at
of them are digital. They're all silver prints.
silver prints. I
Yeah.
love looking at photos of Vermont and Vermonters. It just gives you a little feeling of your history. Okay, so we've covered a lot of that. What else would you like to talk about your future work?
Well, I'm going, I don't know when this is airing, but I'll be in September. I'm flying to California. I'm meeting with a film director there who's interested in doing a documentary on photo booths, and specifically about the very early photo booths. And that's exciting. I have a lot of materials that I've collected, about the photo booths.
And you are the world's expert on the photo booth.
For my 5 minutes of fame, yeah.
Yeah.
I have 2 photo booths I own. I have a 1960, was called a auto photo booth, and I have a photo booth that's called a Photomatic that was made
Photomatic.
by the Mutoscope Company in 1934, and as far as I know, it's the only existing 1934
Do they work?
Photomatic. It needs a lot of work.
You need, yeah.
And it's not the strips. Photomatic images, which is one image which is enclosed in plastic or metal or paper. And
I've never seen one of those.
no, they stopped producing them in the early 1960s. But it was at one point there were probably close to 1 million of them around the world.
Around the world.
And then when the autophoto machines became very popular in the 60s, most of them were junked, which is very sad. So
That happens to a lot of wonderful
Yeah.
things that people make, and
but people don't
fads
throw
that
out
go.
your cameras.
no.
Even though you have digital cameras, keep your film cameras. They're
Yes.
very special, and film will come back.
Yeah. Well, right now I can only think of one place that the Photo Garden on Dorset Street develops like all kinds of different films. A lot of places are just digital. You can just get your digital films developed. So
I know, but-
hopefully it will all come back.
With digital films, when people have storage, most of the images are never going to be printed, and there is a limited amount of time, I think 20 years, that you can access those images,
Oh.
and then they'll be gone forever. But
They
when
just
you get
vanish.
photos, they're printed on paper, they're there forever.
Right, right. Yeah, when you look at your old photo albums and stuff like that, I think that's much more precious.
And you know what's really popular nowadays in photography are what's called vernacular images, street photos, photos from people's photo albums. There's a huge area of interest
Really?
in photos by the ordinary person. There's so, now that everybody has a camera in their phone or whatever, the sensibility of what is art, of what is special, has changed. And digital is here, and digital will probably always be here, but it's not permanent. It's like love letters, information written on paper will always
The
remain.
hard copy.
Right, but
It's
emails,
not just a digital number.
emails that have love letters, emails that have important historical significance, emails that contain information that people in the future are going to want to know. They're not going to be there.
Right.
It's all going to be gone.
And there's so much information, it just turns into a big jumble. Whereas hard copies of photos, letters, things, those are hard copies that just don't disappear.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
So if you would like to be on this show called Art Break, you can email me at artbreakvt@gmail.com. I would love to interview you. If you are an artist, a musician, a photographer, a writer, a chef, I would love to promote your work. And also, if you have any information on George Smith, the
Rutland's Aviator.
Rutland's Aviator pilot, you can send the information to me at artbreakvermont@gmail.com also, and then I can get the information over to Nakki.
I'd be very grateful if anyone out there has personal photographs, letters, newspapers, billboards, anything pertaining to the 4 or 5 years that he flew. The book is definitely going to be happening, and I know the stuff's out there.
Yep, and you're very knowledgeable, and I love the intense amount of research you do on each book. It's fascinating.
It's the chase. I love the
It's great.
chase.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. Well, good luck to you, and thank you so much for being
Thank
on
you,
my
Kathy.
show.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Have you read the news? Have you let it get you? Yeah, people there are saying how bad you're gonna get. And I've been calling to the sky, please don't let more bullets fly. Have you heard the talk of the cities and the towns? There's a fear from the inside and the toil all around. I've been hoping for my help, find the cure to conversation.
Hello, welcome back. I again am Brad Hartley, and this is the segment called Voices Vermont. So today we're going to welcome Rye Matthews. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So Rye is with Flower Power Vermont, located in Ferrisburg. And Flower Power is a diverse, small-scale organic farm specializing in fresh flowers, dried flowers, free-range eggs, and produce, which is marketed through an on-site stand at the farm and through local farmers markets, primarily Shelburne, and you said you're starting again in Burlington?
Burlington, the Earth Day Farmers Market. It's Wednesday nights.
Okay, Wednesday nights. And where is that?
It's in the park, same place as the Saturday market.
So City Hall Park.
City Hall Park.
Starting on Wednesdays, okay.
Yep.
And then they also wholesale to local businesses. So Rye is an interesting young man. He's a UVM graduate with a bachelor's in science in ecological design. He is currently occupied with the organic dairying industry, processing milk products for distribution throughout New England. Rye is also establishing a permaculture consulting firm called Earthen Frame. The goal of his permaculture firm will be leveraging Vermont farms by applying the principles of permaculture to increase both profitability and sustainability. So again, nice to have you, Rye. You grew up on the farm in Ferrisburg, and which
Yes.
is an organic farm, and you think that experience influenced your career choices in any way?
Very much so. It sure did. I've known since I was a little kid that I loved building things and putting things together. I always thought I would be an engineer or an architect or something. But since moving to Vermont, I had to add farmer into the description of what I was doing from then on.
Yeah, well, it's a real
along with
proud thing
everything
to
else.
add.
That's right. I'm very happy about it. Before I lived in Vermont, I came from suburban Pennsylvania near
Okay.
Philadelphia. It's a very typical American suburb. And watching the way things happened there for my childhood and the development, and then coming to Vermont and seeing the contrast really opened up my eyes.
Yeah, wow, okay. All right, I didn't know you moved from Philadelphia up to here.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So how old were you then when you guys started Flower Power or
I was 12.
You were
It was
12.
2002.
Wow. It's a really neat place, yeah, and so just what is that? What do you think the main accomplishment of Flower Power is as far as an organic farm, and kind of how does it differ from some of the neighboring farms around you guys?
Well, it's a very unique place, I'd say. It's just focusing on the small details and the finer sort of aspects of farming. It's small scale, few employees, all locally sourced employees.
The employees are free range,
Yes.
local also, cool.
And it's just committed to morals and ethics in a way that large industrial farms aren't able to do in the same way. It's less focused on making a big profit and more focused on just being resilient and being there for the community year after year, providing the highest quality goods that
Right, yeah.
are possible.
I noticed that in that philosophy, the quality of the goods that you buy tend to be, a big step above just what you get at the supermarket on whether
That's
it's
right.
eggs or produce or
That's
meat
right.
or.
That's the main focus, is just healthy food for people within the community and making it affordable and available.
Yeah, and it's sure not less work than a large-scale commercial farm. I mean, you end up
It
doing
takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work.
A lot of work.
So how many people would be like, this is your busier season, I'm sure, with harvest coming on and all the farmers markets busy. How many people does it take to
There's,
work the farm?
There's 4 full-time employees.
Mhm.
It's Ann and Ed who live there, and then there's 2 others, and then some part-time people as needed. Some people year after year, and others, a lot of just students who work for a summer before they leave for college and things like that.
Yeah.
Really trying to get people involved in farming that didn't know anything about farming before.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you definitely changed minds with
trying to
young people working
open doors.
on a farm like that. I mean,
That's right.
it's so cool, and you learn a lot of really interesting things just about where your food comes from and what it means to get it to your table. And people sometimes don't even realize all the composting and the use of manures as fertilizers and soil enrichment and just so many issues.
Exactly.
Which gets us on to, I'm really curious about your number one, your degree that you got from UVM and what your specialization was there. I'm really interested in permaculture. I don't know if I have a complete understanding of exactly what that means. I know the little bit that I understand, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your degree and what you're hoping to accomplish with your permaculture consulting firm?
Sure. Okay, so my degree it's a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science, and I concentrated in ecological design, which it's a mindset of design. It's not designing a specific thing. It's applied to the whole field of design, be it architecture, landscape, architecture, industrial design, whatever. It's looking through it holistically, trying to look at the whole supply chain of not just the product, but what it takes to make the product and where it goes after it's made.
Right.
Looking at the whole chain and analyzing every aspect of it.
Right, so holistically, like the whole organism, so
yeah,
all the inputs.
Treating it as an organism, where the object is not just endless growth, because that's not what organisms do. They sustain themselves.
Right.
And they regenerate. As parts of the organism die off, they regenerate themselves at the same time and support themselves. And they also fit into larger ecosystems. Any organism that is detrimental to the ecosystem it's in is not going to survive very long.
Right, yeah, right. Just the way like a natural selection process would work in an economic kind of an agricultural framework.
Exactly.
That's very well explained.
And so natural selection, it takes a long time for that process to work itself out. So looking at the larger scale of America, we might not have hit the point for some of these things to be weeded out yet, but that process is certainly happening, and we've done a lot of that with the economic downturn a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
and
that's a nice way of putting it.
So I'm trying to use ecological design to put a new look on how we're approaching the way we do things in everyday life and the way we run our businesses.
Sure. Because you mentioned that, you just briefly mentioned that the nonstop quest for just growth, which would be maximizing profits and expanding your market share, which is a nice way of saying driving out your competitors and your neighbors, and being highly aggressive. That's not a sustainable model to run any kind of business, let alone a food business.
Exactly.
I know too that I read that in 1900, Vermonters supplied 90% of the food that Vermonters consumed and only imported that other 10%. And now I know a few years ago it was even worse. It was about 95% of our food was being imported, and we were only producing 5%. But with like the fluorescence of all the, Vermont farms working towards like farmers marketing, we're actually increasing the amount of food that we're growing for ourselves.
It is increasing. Burlington is leading the country in doing that in terms of sourcing locally and even growing food within the city. It actually has, I think, the highest ratio of any city in the country for food produced in the city that is consumed in the city. That's because of the Intervale, which is a unique farming center among cities that used to be a common thing for cities around around the
Sure.
world.
To have some arable or producible land
Land.
inside the city
Right,
limits.
in the river valleys that flood.
Sure,
annually.
okay, yeah.
And they're still doing that in the Inner Valley. They were able to conserve that through some unique, that's a unique part of Vermont, is that it was able to really preserve the local character and
Yeah.
the farming heritage.
And that's historically was farmland down there, was it not?
That's
just
right.
Winooski River floodplain is what you said.
Yeah, going back to the Abenaki, having
Right.
foraging and cultivating specific plants down there.
Oh, they definitely did.
Yeah.
Definitely actually cleared and cultivated for sure. So yeah, and I also noticed just even riding down the bike path or pedaling the bicycle around Burlington, there is a lot of gardening going on. I don't know if it's more or less than average around the country, but and then the chickens and the poultry
That's
is,
right.
is a new kind of a new spin on
exciting.
an urban area. It is. It's very cool.
Yeah, urban farming is it's a new thing, but it's also an old thing, and that's where permaculture is very cool because it takes what the best of what humans have been doing for thousands of
Sure.
years from around the world, and it tries to pair that with the good things that we have developed through science and modern technology,
Sure.
and how to figure out how to use those things together.
Yeah. Like you don't know where
new
you're
ways.
going if you don't know where you came from. Like
That's right.
I used a line, or I wrote a line when I wrote my little editorial about blending traditional and contemporary beliefs and practices for a new future, because you can't just reject everything your grandparents and their parents learned, or it's just such a waste of time.
Exactly.
And reinventing everything over and over.
No,
I know that only
can't go there.
serves like really narrow interests about maximizing profit.
right.
So that is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you're just making me think of part of what goes along with permaculture is called open source technology. And I look at permaculture as that because the way that it's set up, people freely relate permaculture ideas and principles and promote them and provide access to them as much as possible without charging people.
Like open source, like Linux operating systems on the computer,
Yep.
in the computer realm and stuff. I gotcha. So,
And,
yeah, that's a neat concept.
People are promoting technologies and then putting them online, available to people around the world to
Right.
recreate those in their own communities.
Yeah, boy, open source, that whole philosophy can sure apply to many different things besides just Linux operating
Oh, yeah.
systems, you know.
Yeah.
Isn't that, I mean, a lot of that is like people, men and women, of course, that are professionals during the day, and then in a lot of their spare time, they're providing all the work and what goes into the open source aspect.
Exactly, volunteering their time.
Right. And it has everything that another, like say, a Windows-based operating system has. It has the Office, and it has the Word. It has all the different type of features you're used to, but it's free. Instead of $150 or whatever
Exactly.
for a bunch of zeros and ones, it's free.
Yep.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea also.
So I
Yeah.
can talk more about permaculture because it's something that I only heard about 3 years ago. You probably have heard about it longer than me, being in
Yeah,
in the
maybe,
scene a
maybe
little
10, 15 years or more, a little bit more, when I first read about it in magazines like back home and like, kind of like Back to the Lander type of magazines, which is what I
Right.
was doing at the time, trying to educate ourselves, my wife and I, on what we were going to do with our own little Tennessee farmstead. So,
Right, and that's the traditional sort of frame of permaculture, is for homesteaders and people trying to support themselves off the land. And that's where it's taken foot and grown the most and
Yeah.
across the world. But I think it's coming to a point where it's about to cross the threshold into a broader,
yeah.
just broader experience for affecting more people and being more part of the public atmosphere.
It will increase efficiency if you get rid of some of the more destructive or just the negative aspects that tend to come with really large-scale industrial use of pretty much anything. You know, inherent in the term permaculture implies a more sustainable, permanent method without
Exactly.
you know, shitting in your own nest, as sometimes I
That's right.
put it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different definitions and a lot of people practicing permaculture in different ways.
Sure.
But it's really trying to get at a permanent lifestyle in your region. Like Vermont, the landscape has gone through dramatic changes since Vermonters have been using the land for the past centuries.
Man, some of it's like really dramatic if you look at
very
the photos.
dramatic, from the deforestation and converting everything to sheep pastures and then moving into the dairy industry. So we've had this shifting use of the land. But permaculture is trying to figure out how can we put systems in place on the land now that we don't have to mess with from then on.
Yeah.
And that make best advantage of the land and help to actually heal the land and become self-sufficient on their own, so that humans will be doing less work once we set up
Sure.
sort of earth
And it's less
earth-based
stress on
systems.
like the natural systems around us that, you know, like it or hate it, we all come from those natural systems, and
Right.
and it enhances or at least isn't a negative impact on the natural systems around you.
Yeah, supporting the natural systems around us has untold benefits that we don't even know yet.
Yeah. I remember in Tennessee, I'm going back to use that as a quick example, but the colony collapse disorder with you know, European honeybees, which are not native, but they're highly important in pollinating a lot of crops and whatnot. But I noticed around my little mountain garden, there wasn't the first honeybee that ever came. They were all little wild bee species out of the forest around us. I mean, looked like dozens of types of pollinators, and they did a marvelous job.
That's
you know,
right. Native species are essential for the ecosystems in our communities, and we need to be more aware of that. And we can really get a lot more out of them than we sometimes realize if we look at combining species together to work and just creating resilient ecosystems that you can rely on year after year and get a lot out of.
And if I had slashed and burned, say, 100 or 200 acres around me, none of those little species would have been there, and I never would have discovered that. And what would I have been stuck with? Paying money to import honeybees to get our stuff pollinated. You know, it's amazing what you can learn even by accident. But, well, I really appreciate you stopping by, Ryan. It sounds like you're in for an interesting run of it. And I hear you have a rock band, too, that we might get to hear one of these days.
I'd love to come back and show you.
I would love to have you back. So maybe we'll have you on in a different segment one of these times.
Thank you very much.
So this has been another episode of Critical Mass TV. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.